Hey folks, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
I'm Xavier Portilla,
and welcome back to Two Voice Devs.
two voice apps,
Hey Xavier, how you doing?
doing pretty well. Today
Good,
I'm in Seattle visiting the US for a bit, so yeah, pretty nice.
very good. Am I getting better at pronouncing your name? I'm trying.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It's better.
good. So, when we last spoke, we talked about how you do a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I knew you did a lot with is Dialogflow ES and Dialogflow CX. And I know there have been a lot of kind of interesting announcements coming out from Dialogflow CX recently that when I asked you about them, it seemed like it would make sense to kind of talk about them. So why don't we chat about that for a little bit? Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So can you, I guess, tell us, for people who aren't terribly familiar with Dialogflow CX, and I say this acknowledging that you are an employee at VoiceFlow. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Dialogflow CX and how people can use it and what it's good for and why it's a little different than some other things out there.
Yeah, so Dialogflow CX basically is a flow is like basically is a conversational AI platform from Google that you can build agents or assistants using like a visual interface, a graphic user interface that is based on flows. You can create flows, and then they call it like pages, which are basically the blocks that we have, for instance, in VoiceFlow, and you can transit from one page to another page. So basically, the it acts as a state manager, which is once for all the people that are developing a like chatbots, assistants, or agents. One of the hardest part was while you are developing is to maintain or to create that state manager, locally, while like writing thousands of lines of code. That is basically done with these kind of visualization tools, like for instance, VoiceFlow has. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Dialogflow CX. It has like testing capabilities, so you can test that online. It has NLU capabilities that you can trigger interactions based on your intents and entities. It recognize it, and yeah, it's pretty cool. It's available on Google Cloud, so yeah, really nice.
I think one of the big things for people to understand, if they've only been used to for Dialogflow ES, or if they've only used like Alexa's intent systems, is exactly what it brings to the notion of conversation design. So instead of you still have a notion of intents that are under there, but instead of it being intent
Yeah,
focused, intents have are active in particular nodes or active in particular ways, and it more focuses on the conversation aspect of it than the what
the
phrase gets
NLU.
triggered aspect. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm seeing Dialogflow ES like, like just as a regular NLU engine, like, like Microsoft Lewis or the new Microsoft, I think it's conversational language understanding, something like that. It's called Microsoft Clue. So I'm seeing ES like that, and this is like a evolution of just not only having that, but also having those capabilities of conversational design.
right, whereas CX is much more like something like voice flow, where you're mapping out an entire conversation and managing how the transitions go from part of the conversation to another. So
Exactly.
you mentioned two concepts that I feel like we need to make clear, and some of it's going to come out in what we're talking about. The first is what they refer to as a page. You want to kind of summarize what a page is, I guess?
Yeah, so page on CX is basically a state in the conversation. So on the with a page is basically yeah, like you will define there like all the things that are gonna be execute in that state in that page, and how are you gonna transition to another page, to another state basically within a flow, or transition to another flow, because you can transition to another flows.
Okay, and that gets to the other concept, which is what is a flow?
So flow is like different conversations within a bigger conversation, basically different topics within a different conversation. So to give an example, let's say that you have a bank agent. So a flow could be making a transfer, that's a flow. And another flow could be send like, I don't know, like checking your balance. Another flow could be send money, you know,
One
which
of the
is
one of the examples that they give that I liked is that if you think about it in terms of a restaurant ordering conversation, you may have a flow where you're placing your order, and sometimes you'll have a subflow in there where you need to describe something in more detail. And then you've got a flow that involves how you're going to pay, where do you want it delivered to, and another flow involving how are you going to pay for it, and another flow confirming
exactly.
everything. And at any point in there, you may need to jump to a different part of the conversation.
Exactly.
But each of those components may involve multiple turns, multiple pages, but they're all kind of self-contained in themselves.
Exactly. No, that's a good example. And the most important thing as well of a flow is, I mean, to, like when you are designing a conversation, it's better to have these kind of things in different flows, but also like having flows that can be reused, like for instance, the payment flow. If that can be reused in multiple places, that is the perfect scenario, because you don't need to create like a payment flow for this scenario, another payment flow for this scenario. You are reusing the flow. And so that on the dev side, it's better to debug and also to scale.
And I think that's a fantastic example of getting to this notion that we talked about for a long time about voice components, being able to build a component once and just plug it in where it's necessary. And that actually brings us to one of the new features, and that's pre-built components that are now
Exactly.
available from Dialogflow CX directly. So you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so in the past, what we had were like basically pre-built agents. So when you were in the, creating in the agents, basically on the CX console, you could have like, like import a pre-built agent. A pre-built agent is basically a whole agent, a big agent. For instance, let's say that, I don't know, about ordering, for example, there was a pre-built agent for that, but that is a huge use case, like broader. In this case, what they release is like pre-built components, and that was pre-built flows, which is really great because like it's not only an agent, because for instance an agent could not fit for your use case, but a component, let's say that a component is about, I don't know, like sending an email or a payment using PayPal or Stripe, whatever. Those pre-built components are gonna be there, so they release some of the pre-built components that you can reuse it on your. If you go to the CX console, you go to the agents, you can I think it's on the manage tab, you can check the pre-built components, and that is great because first, you not only are reusing pre-built components, but also you can learn about how those components are built, because those components are built using best practices and all these things, which is great.
So looking at the list, I mean, some of these they're not exactly complicated in every case, but it's things like address collection and credit card CVV collection, date of birth, I'm not sure why it's date of birth and not just a generic date, but okay. And, you know, if you look at the details of what they do is, sure, it's easy when a user, you know, you ask for an address and a person gives a complete address. That's easy, that's straightforward. But, you know, sometimes the user is just going to give a street address. So you need to prompt them for more information, or they give you,
Exactly.
you know, some information that's conflicting and you need to have them clarify it. And having that as a single component, you know, it just takes a whole lot of work out of what you need to do when you're building a bot.
Exactly.
You know,
And
so
they're like super, I don't know, I mean, I'm not gonna say like a percentage, but they're like common use cases that all the people are using, and it's great to have this, because at least for you, you can focus on, you know, like on other things of your conversation, because you are gonna reuse these prebuilt components, and you know, like it's uh, you know, like less frustrating for the conversational designer or for the conversational AI developer.
right, well, and also for the user. I mean, because now it starts meaning that you've got these standardized components, just like you had standardized widgets on a web page. You know, the designer knows what a widget's going to look like, the developer knows how the widget behaves, and the user knows how the widget behaves across different applications. So
Yeah,
I think this is a great new feature, and I'm
it
excited. You know,
is. It is.
this is the sort of thing I feel like as voice developers we've been waiting for 5 or 7 years, and we've been talking about it in the abstract, and finally it's there.
Finally, yeah, no, and I mean, from here on, they will. I'm pretty sure that they are gonna start, you know, like setting more prebuilt components, and hopefully in the future they will allow to, you know, like import. I mean, or create like kind of a marketplace where the community can create prebuilt components, and we can reuse it. So that is gonna be wonderful. Right now, it's some kind of that, because you can export a flow that was introduced, I think, 2 months ago or something like that. So you can export a flow and import a flow. So even within the community, you can build a really cool component, a really cool flow that can be reused. But you know, like having this kind of marketplace could be really good as well.
No, I
That we
think
have.
it's gonna, right, I think it's clearly pointing in that direction, and I think it's going to be fantastic. And one of the other things that kind of supports that feature of creating these components that are clearly isolated, you know, that these flows can just be designed and developed on their own and treated as a black box, is another feature that was recently released, and that was called flow scoped parameters. So maybe, I guess, explain what a parameter is and what scopes we used to have, and what this new flow scope is about.
So a parameter basically is like a variable that has to be filled when you enter in a page, for example. Let's say that you need to fulfill an action. For instance, for the birth date, you need the day, the month, and the year. So you need these three things. So these are parameters. So that is in the past, well, like when you create that, that was like available everywhere, like in the webhook and all these things. You can access to those parameters. That was like a global parameters. Right now, with the flow scope, you can create like those parameters that they are gonna live only in that flow. You know, so and as you say, like that will help you to that black box, you know, like it is only in that flow, and that's it, you know. After that flow, that is not gonna leave, or you cannot access anymore, you know, to that flow parameter, because that don't make sense, because it's there, you have accomplished your action and it's done, you know. You don't need the parameter anymore.
Right, you know, and I think that if I remember correctly, they had defined different types of parameters. So there are intent parameters, which were only available during when an intent got triggered and during its handler.
Exactly.
I guess similarly, there was a form parameter, which,
Yes.
okay. And forms are they're kind of like what it sounds like, I guess. Forms on a page, you know. If you're thinking
Yeah.
of filling in a web page, you had a form that's the same sort of thing. And we then had these global and session parameters, which were available everywhere. And now we've got these flow ones. And you know, I started reading about it. There's a set of rules, and it wasn't entirely clear to me what the rules were. If you return to a flow later, if the flow parameters that were previously set in that flow were available again, that wasn't entirely clear to me. So did it make sense to you, or should we just tell people to read about it and experiment if they need it?
They should experiment, because I have the same like kind of thought. Like when you go to a flow, the flow scope parameters are basically like cleanup, and then when you go back, you cannot access to those flow parameters, because basically it's like you move, from one place to another. So I have the same thought as you, but yeah, I would say like let's bring this question to the community, so they can answer that for us.
I feel like as I read through it, I feel like it was everything about this makes sense. So there's not going to be any huge surprises, but it's difficult to explain in documents. So I encourage people to take a look and
Yeah,
make sure you understand it when you're dealing with multiple flows. And in particular,
yeah,
it's in cases like where one flow calls another flow calls another flow.
exactly. Like when you feel that stuck,
Right,
basically.
when you're leaving the stack, what remains active when? And then
Exactly.
the final update that I think we wanted to highlight was what they refer to as system functions, and they've added a bunch of new system functions. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit
So
about what a system function is and what these new changes are?
yeah, so system functions are functions that are available that you can use in the canvas. So instead of, like for instance, that you want to validate a date, or if you want to make like, I don't know, like a string contains or something like that, instead of calling a webhook, what they created was the system function. So there are functions that you can use in the canvas without calling a webhook, and that's it. They're super useful, and like time to time they release a new function. So in last month they released a bunch of validation functions and new functions that are quite useful. So that means that we are gonna call less and less our webhooks to do some validations, which is better in terms of cost and also in terms of performance. So they have introduced, like for instance, like is credit card number, so you can easily check that your parameter is a credit card number based on, or instead of having a webhook that has that regex, which is really really cool. Then to check if a string is a date, is a future date, is a past date, if a string is a phone number or not, the round function, to object, to phone number, upper. So yeah, these kind of things like seems like, like simple, or like easy that they are there, but once like you realize the powerful of these things, when you don't have these functions and you have to create your webhooks to validate these things, and now that they are available in the canvas is super powerful, and when you are developing those are like super fast.
Yeah, no, I think this is a case where some baseline functionality being directly in the page processing is better than having to handle it on a later server call. So these are, some of these, again, they seem basic, they seem simple, but they make the developer and the user experience a whole lot better. So
way better, and the inner loop is like faster, because instead of like developing your webhook, push it, change it in your CX like agent, it's just like that. You can test it directly in the CX console, so it's pretty nice to have that.
So some of these are exciting new updates. I'm really interested in seeing, where things go. I think this is really showing that Google's committed to this platform, and they're doing
Yep.
some really, I feel like they're doing some really forward-thinking stuff with where they want Dialogflow CX to go in general.
Exactly. I think, yeah, because for instance, as you know, like we were coming from Google Assistant or from Dialogflow CX, and like when Google is not committed to a feature, you don't see any new releases and other stuff, and we are seeing new stuff coming every single month. So yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm so happy to have this.
So this is exciting. We're going to have to get you on another time to talk about all the exciting stuff that VoiceFlow is doing, because there's a lot of exciting stuff. But that will have to be another time. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what people think about what's going on with Dialogflow CX. How, if you're intending to use it still, where you see it fitting in, and what you think of these new features. Feel free to reach out to us on social networks, comments below. And again, we will see you another time on Two Voice Devs.
On Two Voice Devs. See you.
Thanks for joining me again. Take care.
Take care, Alan. Have a great one. See you.